Welcome into the Pacific Office Automation post-game scoreboard show for the 9th consecutive time this season, and for the 3rd consecutive week as number one. A victorious edition of the post-game scoreboard show. The Ducks winners 38-17 over the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines. They haven't looked the part this year, but nonetheless, the Ducks go into the big house. They take care of business. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz here with you tonight. Fellas, how we doing?
Doing just fine. I mean, that was a nice way to cap off the win for Oregon, finding a way in the final minutes to make sure, for whatever reason, when you could have kneed the ball out, you score a touchdown to really emphasize that you just dominated Michigan all day long. Beautiful.
Beautiful indeed. Lots to get to from this game, because I think for the first time we saw some serious obstacles for this team, at least on the road. There hasn't been a lot of pushback so far this season, but today some things that the team had to overcome. Injury, special teams gaffe early on, and going into an opponent's venue that has 100,000 plus there pulling for the national champs, or the former national champs, reigning national champs. It's still a tall order, even if you're the number one team in the land. And we often talk about whether things look the way they should. I think it's inevitable. Things don't go perfect when you're on the road, but how do you evaluate this game start to finish for the Ducks?
There are things that you need to fix, obviously, but I felt like for the most part, you took care of business. Like, there was never really a point in time in this game where you were worried about Michigan coming back and winning. I mean, the only reason that it was tied after 0-0 is because you had a freshman punt returner who's in because Tez Johnson gets hurt.
Yep.
And he makes a freshman punt returner mistake. He should have just, hey, fair catch the ball, move on. But of course he's not going to
catch it clean.
And he did. But of course he's not going to do it. It's like the minute that you give a wide receiver the opportunity to throw the football, they're going to throw it every single time. Doesn't matter if the guy's double covered or if it's easier for them to run for the first down, whatever. He's going to just try and make a play, which I can appreciate. Aside from that turnover there, Michigan going down and scoring, you were in front the whole time by multiple scores. I felt like you ran the ball well. Jordan James had 117 yards on the ground. I felt like you were going to be able to beat this Michigan team on the edges. I thought going into the game it would be with Evan Stewart, who he did have an incredible catch. Unfortunately, it didn't count. And then he had an incredible drop that counted as a catch. Yep. So good for him. But because of the Tez Johnson injury, he now gets more of the focus, so that leads to a big game from Trayshawn Holden. They just didn't have a secondary Michigan that was going to be able to keep up with you. And because you scored early and you scored often in that first half, you got a big lead, and you made Warren Davis try and throw, or Davis Warren, excuse me, and you're not going to win that game as Michigan. You are not going to win a football game where you have to throw. If Michigan is going to win a football game, it has to be close, and they have to run the football, and Oregon got them out of it.
Yeah, as a Ducks fan, once that was a 2-touchdown margin,
it was over.
I didn't have any thought that they weren't going to win that football game. Is it annoying when Michigan scores again? Sure, but it felt like this was the kind of game that, and it's. But the roles have been reversed before. Even in the last 2 times that Oregon beat Michigan, Michigan had all the dudes and Oregon had some of the dudes, and they found a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And those roles are reversed now. Oregon has all the dudes. Michigan still has plenty, but they did not have enough to compete today. And we ended up seeing, I think, the product, and we'll talk more about this as well, like just the depth, the product of all the personnel work that they've put in the recruiting arena, in the transfer portal. It flashed its brilliance again today, the roster that they've put together, because the next thing I think that is maybe the most significant thing that happened today is the Tez Johnson injury. We'll try to connect with Dusty Harra here in a little bit and see if we know anything about the status of that. I'm sure we will get nothing official, but no idea if that's something short-term or long-term.
Right.
But what we know is that today he was out early, and really the entirety of the rest of the receiving group stepped up. And I thought it was low early. It was some Stewart. You got Holden late. Sadiq got involved. Ferguson got involved. Mm-hmm. The depth and the ability to kind of next man up, and even if you lose a guy as valuable as Tez, not miss a beat, I think speaks volumes of what they put together here.
100%. I mean, Trayshawn Holden just had an absolute whale of a game.
Yeah.
And that's really encouraging to see, because he could have easily put his head in the dirt after what happened in the Ohio State game. Like, that's an easy one for a young kid. I made a mistake. Now I just let everything snowball. And it's very clear that Coach Lanning and that staff, they punished him, but they punished him in a way that didn't take him out mentally, right? Like, yeah, it's going to lead to more Justice Lowe opportunities, and Justice Lowe has ran with them, which is great to see from the local kid. But at the same time, you have to make sure that Holden is punished in a way that he knows he messed up and he can never do that again, or even think about doing it again, right? But you can't take him completely out of the game. You can't take him completely out of this season. And so what Trayshawn has done a great job, especially in this game, of is, hey, I'm going to have my opportunities. I have to find a way to make up for the mistake that I had and earn all that trust back. And I feel like he did a good job of earning a lot of that trust back in this game. He had a lot of one-on-one opportunities, and he won. He won against zone coverage. He found where the holes were, sat down in them, and he got passes from Dylan Gabriel, and he caught them all. There were no drops.
Yep.
I thought that Holden had a big game. Now, if Tez Johnson is out for a while, you're going to have to replace him with that middle of the field target. Tez Johnson is great at taking a drag route for turning a 3-yard catch into a 3-yard airtime catch and then getting 20 on the run.
Right.
You need to find that wide receiver who can now fill that role. I felt like in this game, obviously Evan Stewart was able to get open on some deep shots. They just weren't able to connect between Gabriel and him. There needs to be that medium guy. I feel like you have the short guys in the tight ends.
And did
you
we
need
see
the
it?
medium.
Did you think we saw it at the end a little bit with Holden when he kind of split the seam and then he doubled back on the safety? Like
he had a couple, yes.
That felt a little Tez-esque.
He had a couple, and then it felt like Lowe had the bubble screens. That was like what Tez would normally do, or the tunnel screens, where Tez would get that catch in the tunnel screen, and then he turns it backwards pass into an 8-yard gain. So I feel like they need to find one wide receiver that can do that, or they need to find one that can do the medium. Maybe that's Holden. One that can do the short. Maybe that's Lowe. To replace that injury.
Might be a little tougher for Trayshawn to be that slot guy just because he's 6'3". I mean, I think just size-wise, you're kind of suited better to put like Justice Lowe and Evan Stewart in that position, but I think Holden is probably the more athletic guy there. But can we talk about the mentality that this kid has? And I think that Oregon Duck fans need to have a lot of pride in Trayshawn Holden and the fact that this is the guy that, guess what? You made a mistake, you owned it, and then you showed up and were able to perform like this. You literally had no dip in anything that we saw that Trayshawn was doing in the first 6 games of the year. He came right back and did it all against Michigan today, and it's just so impressive, and it's so far along compared to what the Ducks used to have at every position. So just good mental toughness, and I think Oregon fans should be proud of that.
Yeah, and even today, I think he may not have been a starter until Tez went down, because the previous,
it was Lowe.
So because Lowe was getting fed early, and I didn't see much of Holden on the field. So for him not to even check out of this game, and to continue to push, I think these are the things that you see in championship level teams. These people and personnel care enough about what they're doing to figure it out. And then back to the X's and O's of it, I'll keep banging this drum. Someone you can throw on the slot every now and then, Kenyon Sadiq. Keep feeding that guy. He's a monster. And I think just creates all kinds of matchup problems. So I loved the way that they used their other weapons today in the receiving game once Tez wasn't available. We'll talk a little bit more about navigating life without Tez if that ends up being the case. But let's flip to the other side of the ball for a second, Will. One of the biggest reasons I felt confident about the Ducks in this game is that even when you have hiccups, even when the offense stalls out, they say in football your defense travels, and the Oregon defense, you knew that the Michigan offense was a little bit limited, at least at the quarterback position, but you knew that Oregon, even if Michigan had a few more weapons, was going to come ready for this one. And I think despite maybe giving up a little bit more than you would have anticipated, just yardage-wise and a few more first downs, it was a pretty impressive performance top to bottom.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one guy killed you. Colston Loveland killed you. 7 receptions, 112 yards. Everyone else was kept in check. Your next top yardage gainer is Donovan Edwards at 52 yards.
Yeah.
Like, you had one guy who is going to be a high draft pick. I don't know if he's going to be a first-round guy or if he's going to be a day 2, but he's going to be an early day 2. He's a very good football player, and he got you. He's a matchup nightmare. It's hard for teams to stop him, and it's clear that he had built some trust there with the quarterback, and that's who they were going to find when they needed a big play. Aside from that, you dominated them. Yeah, you didn't get a sack in this game, but you had 7 tackles for losses. You had linebackers that were playing in the backfield. Derek Harmon to start the game just let everyone know, hey, we're not going to be able to run the football his way. When they tried to run that outside zone, at him, and the guard isn't able to get over the top. Harmon just goes in, and he gets the tackle there in the backfield. I can't remember if it was on Mullings or if it was on Edwards. But right away, it's Michigan in 2nd and 15. And so I felt like this defense, they played well, they played fast, they played in the backfield, and there were just a couple of times where a really good football player, a guy who is going to have a shot at being on one of the All-American teams, he beat you. And you know what? That's okay because Michigan has really good players too. Yeah. In some spots.
Yeah. I was watching the game with my stepdad, and he kept getting upset when Michigan would do something good, and he'd be like, "Come on, guys!" with like Oregon. I'm like, they're trying too, and they're also pretty good at football.
Right.
Like, I mean,
right.
No one's gonna roll over for us just because we like the Ducks. But.
I mean, can I push back on that a little bit? Because I think I agree with your dad's sentiment a little bit, just because of the fact that if you look at the numbers, yes, Oregon dominated, but there were a couple of those points, like obviously the first fumble, or the only fumble that Oregon had, Ryan Pelham basically allowed a 14-point swing to happen at the beginning of the game. And then in the third quarter, when Oregon wasn't scoring, it was, I don't know, in my mind getting a little tumultuous, like, oh, this is close. And there are 2 key third downs that Oregon allowed Michigan to convert in that quarter alone. So it was just like, in the situations, they let them get almost there, but not quite, which is good. But if I'm a Duck fan, I want to see them dominate. I understand Michigan is a decent team, but they can't throw the ball. They can't. Why let them throw the ball even to one guy? If it's the only guy, double cover him, throw to someone else.
And here's where I think they were. Like, that's how good he is. That's how good Colston Loveland is. Fair. When you go through and you look at the stats, he had half of the catches today. They were 13 of 25 passing, but Davis Warren was 13 of 23. Colston Loveland had 7 catches. They had 165 yards passing. He had 112 of those yards. They had 270 yards as a team total. He had 114. That's how good Colston Loveland is. And you can double cover him. You can do whatever you want with him. Loveland is a matchup nightmare, and that's going to be hard for anyone to try and stop. He's a tight end, remember. He's 6'5", 245. He runs like a wide receiver. There were times where you put Jabbar Muhammad on him, your best cover guy, on a tight end, which I like Jabbar Muhammad in most matchups against almost anyone. I don't know that I love him against a tight end. So there are going to be times where you lose.
And just real quick, who do you think personnel-wise would be the answer for that? Someone like Bossa, or like what's...
No, because he's bigger than Bossa too. Like, you're going to have to throw a bunch of different looks at him. And to be honest with you, I would have liked to have seen Oregon's D-line win more one-on-one pass rushes. You didn't have a sack. Now, did you get after Davis Warren? Yes, you did, and you made life uncomfortable. And I felt like, for the most part, you played in the backfield of that Michigan team. But it felt like on those big Colston Loveland catches, he had just enough time to stand in there, get the throw off, and you're asking a defense to lock down, a top 2-3 tight end in the country right now? Like, that's tough. That's tough. You did your job. He had a couple big plays. I still think that you dominated this game.